Following the 2011 Tohoku disaster, Tohoku has seceded from Japan under the rule of the Nihonmatsu Front, who themselves are overwhelmed internally by an extremist group known only as F. This manga reimagines the events following the disaster by splicing in real-world parallels, including semi-fictional representations of real people and their stories, and various terrorist events to tell a hauntingly relevant story of survival in extreme circumstances, and to portray the frustration that comes with the government's lack of response to help the citizens it swears to protect. This is Imai Arata's F. Before we begin, I want to put a bit of a content warning on this video because this manga does deal with a lot of dark and disturbing imagery, much of which is lifted right from real-world events that have happened to real people. But with that out of the way, what's going on, folks? Zach from Uchuu Shelf here. Hope you guys are doing good and reading lots of manga. Today, we are talking about yet another indie, underground, alternative manga that you've probably never heard of until you clicked on this video, and that is Imai Arata's F. F follows a British journalist by the name of John Cantlie who, using a friend's identification, sneaks into a post-2011 Fukushima to document the ongoing conflict between the rebel Nihonmatsu Front and the radicalized terrorist group, the State of F. After the bus he's on is hit with an explosion, John escapes through the northern backwoods until he comes across a Nihonmatsu camp where he is taken in and questioned. Fortunately for him, those at the camp believe his fake identity and permit him to stay and document their side of the struggle to get the word of their cause out. While out on the front lines of Iwaki, F begins to overpower the Nihonmatsu Front by dropping bombs from overhead. And amidst this chaos, John takes the opportunity to hide and continue towards his true goal of finding his friend, a captured American journalist named James Foley. As F encroaches on the Nihonmatsu Front, John is ordered to head for a refugee camp where he is reunited with James, who proposes that they team up to document the more harrowing parts of the ongoing war, namely the impending fall of the Nihonmatsu Front. While at an internet cafe to regroup and plan their journey, John and James are handed over to the leader of F, where they are transported and further held as hostages, subjecting them to daily torture and mock executions. The two manage to escape, but escaping doesn't come without consequence. James is executed by F, and John is made not only to film it, but to edit it and continue making propaganda for the terrorist group. Even considering other alternative and indie manga that I have covered here on Uchuu Shelf, Imai Arata's F is vastly different for a number of reasons. Very few works of manga, even in the mainstream or at least here in the West, very rarely touch on real-world politics. And for the few that do, don't touch on them to the degree that F does. F has taken disturbing parts of conflict involving ISIS and their hostages and applied it to the 2011 Tohoku disaster in a hauntingly seamless way. And it does this so effectively not solely to fictionalize it for the sake of adding intrigue to the story, but to brilliantly showcase the universality and how you can be disappointed in a government's lack of or underwhelming response to crisis. Now, if the names I've mentioned in summarizing this manga sound a little bit familiar to you, that's because they're semi-fictionalized representations of real journalists, and a lot of this manga is centered around real events that happened to them. John Cantlie, for example, famously was a British journalist captured by ISIS who went on to produce propaganda for them, namely the 7-part series Lend Me Your Ears, which is referenced quite a bit in this manga. In F, he is portrayed as a half-British, half-Japanese man using the author's identity to work his way through Fukushima, but a lot of what happens to him in this manga has actually happened to him in real life. And James Foley was an American journalist who, like John Cantlie, was also captured. And I won't go too deep into what events surrounding James Foley was accurately portrayed. Suffice to say, if you look it up, you'll find that it's actually fairly accurate. This manga has sent me down probably the deepest rabbit hole I've been down in quite some time. Admittedly, I'm not as up on the events of the world as I probably should be, and I knew that James Foley was a real-world American journalist who I thought maybe was just added to the manga to give it a bit of real-world flair. But as I was describing the events of this manga to my partner, she pointed out that no, John Cantlie was actually a journalist who was captured. And as I further described some of what happens to John in the manga, she went, no, these are actual things that happened to him. And after falling down that rabbit hole, listening to different podcasts and videos and then coming back to it, a lot of what happens to John in this manga is scarily accurate. For example, John Cantlie and James Foley actually did go to an internet cafe to not only upload files, but to plan their next move, and they were eventually cornered. And it's just that kind of realism that adds a really rich depth to this manga. And it's not just the events of this manga that are being accurately depicted, but the imagery used in portraying the terrorist group F and their propaganda videos are lifted pretty much one-one with a lot of ISIS videos. Now, F is, and probably always will be, the most obscure, unknown manga that I cover on this channel. In Japanese, the manga is titled I Am John Cantlie, and had around 200 copies sold at various avant-garde art exhibitions throughout Japan. And that's kind of what got me excited about reviewing this manga, because my biggest goal here on Uchuu Shelf has always been to introduce really cool manga to as many people as humanly possible, especially manga that would fall under people's radars. And like other Gekika, indie, or alternative manga that I cover on this channel, I know that it's not going to be for everyone. The art isn't going to be as polished or defined as traditional manga, But to be perfectly honest, that's kind of what makes alternative manga so charming. The art is oftentimes both literally and emotionally expressive in ways that other manga might not be brave enough to explore. And a lot of stories you find in these different types of manga, alternative, indie, gekika, are stories that you're not going to find in other manga. So if you pair this art with this type of storytelling, you have an experience that if you're a manga or comics fan, you owe yourself to explore. And F by Imai Arata is no exception to this rule. F perfectly encapsulates the grief and frustration that comes with uncertainty and disorder, and does so by portraying these moments of chaos, anxiety, and near death as hastily scribbled chaos. And it dives into the lives of those who tell important stories even at the risk of their own. There's so much more I could say about this manga, but I wouldn't be able to say it as effectively as manga historian and F translator Ryan Holmberg. F comes with this really brilliantly written essay by Holmberg that really contextualizes a lot of the imagery used in relation to the 2011 Tohoku disaster. And I won't dive too deep into that because I could never effectively summarize something so well written by someone much smarter than I am. Suffice to say, I would give this essay a read immediately following the last page of this manga. Now, while I have always been fascinated and intrigued by the underground manga scene in Japan, Watashi no Mazui Nihongo does not afford me the opportunity to explore this a lot. I have had an admittedly really great year with manga because I've gotten to explore a lot more of these stories thanks to small press publishers like Glacier Bay Books. It's kind of revitalized my interest not only in manga but just in collecting manga. Again, a lot of what I've been reading and collecting has been centering around a lot of this indie, gekika, alternative manga, things you wouldn't typically hear other people on YouTube or on the internet talk about unless you're specifically in those circles. For example, earlier this year I discovered Masamoto Jushichi's Children of Mootown, which immediately became my second favorite manga of all time, and if it wasn't thanks to publishers like Glacier Bay Books taking a chance on these underground stories, I would have never discovered that. And it somewhat pains me to know that there are probably other stories throughout the world, not just in Japan and not just in manga, that I'm never going to experience that might even be my favorites, but that's just kind of how life goes, I guess. I find that now that I'm older, I'm basing a lot of my favorite things less on general cool factors or some arbitrary point system based on art and story, and more on the feeling and atmosphere I'm left with. It's been a couple of days since I finished F, and I still cannot shake that harrowing discomfort it leaves you with. I'm also still kind of digging through this rabbit hole of learning more about John Cantlie and James Foley and all the events surrounding them, so I do have to give a bit of credit to this manga for giving me an admittedly disturbing rabbit hole to go down. And I don't know the exact position it would be because it's never really set in stone. As I've said before, my top whatever always changes with my mood and my age and how I'm feeling on a specific day, but there's no doubt that F by Imai Arata is easily in my top 10 manga of all time. So while I understand that a lot of people might be put off by the art style or the story contents, I would really urge you to experience this story for what it is. Something unique that you're not going to find anywhere else. F by Imai Arata is available in English from Glacier Bay Books if you want to know where to pre-order that, or if you're watching this months in advance where to buy it. I'll leave some links down in the description below. You can also follow Glacier Bay Books over on Twitter and visit their website for more information on where you can buy manga elsewhere. In any case, folks, that is it for today's video. Thank you for stopping by and listening to me ramble on about manga you've never heard of before. Hopefully this video helps introduce you to a new manga that you can enjoy the same way I did. Now, really quickly, I know a lot of you have been asking, by a lot of you, I mean like 2 or 3 people on Instagram and Twitter collectively, when are more videos coming out? And the answer to that, I don't know. Soon. I hope it's soon. The main reason I haven't been able to get to YouTube a lot lately is because I've been super busy with work and me and my partner are buying an apartment right now. So once I get settled in and once I get the new studio set up, I will be bringing you guys videos as frequently as I'm bringing them now. Hopefully. But hopefully soon, because I want to introduce you guys to some damn cool manga that are coming down the pipeline, some manga I got sitting on my shelf that I'm still reading, and hopefully give you guys an appreciation of manga you never considered you would enjoy. If that is the case, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Uchuu Shelf, and there's also a smorgasbord of buttons for you to click down below this video, including the like button. That helps me out. The dislike button, don't do that, but it still helps me out. And the subscribe button, which also helps me out. But until next time, folks, happy reading.
Outro. This is an outro. Yeah. You're free to go now. Seriously, leave. I mean, why are you sitting here, man? Get out of here, man. Go. Come on. Leave. Goodbye.